So, you think DC is expensive? Well, of course it is, the nation's capital. But as things have evolved over time, there are like some sneaky ways that you can save money and some things that you can do. And I'm not going to be able to solve this whole money conundrum that goes on here because things really are expensive, but we're going to talk about some stuff. So, I've done several cost of living videos on the area. I've got them for Arlington, Alexandria, Montgomery County, and then I've done it for DC as well. So you should check those out if you want to talk specifics or dive a little bit deeper into each of those areas. But just know that those are out there. And also know that if you go to Google cost of living in DC, an unbelievable preponderance of the websites that you're going to find are actually written by AI. I don't use AI. I just probably should, but I don't. I write everything myself. I pull the information myself, and you should know this because, of course, your mileage may vary. You may find something a little bit different than what I'm telling you, especially if you're zoned in on a certain area. But just know that everything that I write is from the heart, from the mind, whatever it might be. I've never been that person that has trouble expressing myself verbally or in written form. Surprise. I'm Melissa Terzis, DC Real Estate Mama, and this is the channel where I discuss all things real estate and DC. So let's dive into this. In 2023, our local news station here, WTOP, reported that DC's cost of living overall was 53% higher than average, but housing here is actually 144% higher. I know, that's pretty wild, and that's what makes it so unbelievably expensive to live here. Now, what I did was I went back 6 months and I looked in our MLS, which is our multiple listing service. I don't want to give you guys like, sort of loosey-goosey, it's this much more, it's this much more. I want to talk real numbers today. So that is what we are going to do. One disclaimer. You should know that when we're talking about single family homes, especially in the close-in areas, I'm including what you might call a townhome if you don't live in this area, or a row home, where if maybe you live in New York or another city that has housing that's very old, they call those row homes. And so I live in one of those. They are, for most people, they would consider it like a single family home, but it's not necessarily something like you would see a little bit further out in the burbs where you've got grass on all four sides and your house is not touching anybody else. So I am including row homes in this because if I didn't, it would really skew the results. So in DC, in the last 6 months, all the single family homes to include row homes closed at an average price of $1,092,000. Condos overall of all sizes closed at an average of $585,000. And then I pulled out the 1-bedroom condos only because I wanted to give a gauge of what that was. And so 1-bedrooms only in DC closed at an average of $405,000 for the last 6 months. That's basically going to be the last 6 months of 2023 because we are right now in the beginning of 24. So over in Arlington, the average closed price on single family homes and row homes was $1.293 million. So $1,293,000. That's to be expected because you are going to have more houses that might be single family, truly with the yards on all four sides and not necessarily like the attached townhome situation. And those get, the most premium when it comes to price inflation. So condos in Arlington closed at an average of $501,000, and then I pulled out the 1-bedroom condos only, and they closed at an average of $365,000. So you see in Arlington, condo prices go lower than DC, but the housing prices are higher. All right, now let's move on to the city of Alexandria. So if we go down there, we'll see that prices sort of go down a bit across the board. The average price in the last 6 months for a single family home, which does also include row homes in Alexandria, is $1,047,000. Condos closed there at an average of $476,000. And when you pull out just the 1-bedrooms, they had an average of $351,000 where they closed. Now, let's talk about Fairfax County. So Arlington and Alexandria are not part of Fairfax County. At least the city of Alexandria isn't. There is an area called Alexandria that's outside the Beltway, and that is part of Fairfax County. But let's talk about Fairfax because it is the closest county on the Virginia side to downtown DC. Once you get out there, the prices are going to be pretty varied in all the different cities and towns, right? So you're going to have areas like McLean, which is closer in, a lot bigger houses there, and their average price there is going to be something like $2 million. It's just more expensive than what you're going to see in other areas. If you go to actual Fairfax, like the town of Fairfax that's there, you're going to see prices on single family homes that average around $850,000. So there's definitely a wide variety of homes that you can find in Fairfax. So now let's talk about Maryland. So I didn't want to do all of Montgomery County because it really does wildly change to, the points north. But let's do Bethesda, right? That's the closest in. So in Bethesda, the single family homes in the last 6 months closed at an average of $1.583 million. Highest that we're seeing. Condos sold at an average price of $528,000. When you net out the one bedroom condos, they sold at an average of $269,000. Now, before you call Bethesda this amazing deal, comparatively speaking, when it comes to condos, there is something you should know. A lot of these condos that are bringing this average price to $269,000 are in high-rise buildings or buildings where they may carry a very high monthly fee for the common charges and condo fees. This is always going to negatively impact market value. There's really kind of something where people will sustain a few $100s a month condo fee up to $300, $400, even $500. People are kind of learning that that's what's to be expected. When you start to see condo fees that go $900 to $1,000 to $1,200, and they really just don't include a lot of extra stuff to justify that, people really they start to think about that because that's very impactful to the monthly outlay of cash that you're going to do. So now let's go over to Silver Spring, Maryland, which is more affordable. And most over here are actually truly going to be single family homes. So in Silver Spring, the average single family home, $629,000. So you can see that you're getting a lot more affordability here. Condos average a closed price of $284,000. One bedrooms alone were $191,000, but it's the same story here as Bethesda. There are going to be some buildings that are skewing this price down because they have very high monthly fees, and it all comes out in the wash in the end. So now average rents, let's talk about those. I don't really handle rentals, but I'm going to go through the average rents as well for you. In DC, the average rent on a one bedroom is $2,319, so $2,319. In Arlington, $2,010. City of Alexandria is $1,950. Bethesda's average rent is $2,035, and Silver Spring's average rent is $1,691. All right, so what is the key then to saving money in the housing market if these prices are all so high? Well, honestly, it's what I've been spouting to clients and in my videos for many, many, many years. Any real estate that I've bought has kind of followed this general formula. It needed work. It had been overlooked by other people. It needed a level of renovation that the average person just wasn't willing to take on. Most people will kind of watch those HGTV shows and say, yeah, we're willing to do some light work. But when it comes down to it, most people don't even really want to have to paint if they, that's not fun for a lot of people. So they just don't want to have to do that. So essentially what you want to do is you want to buy the house you can afford in the best location possible. Don't even be afraid of high interest rates. We just don't see the market shift that much in this area. The rates went up close to 8% in the fall, and we still had year over year price increases. It was kind of amazing. For us here, it's more of an inventory problem. There's just not enough for sale. But this is just what you should know, right? In this area, prices seem to always go up. I worked for a real estate developer 20-something odd years ago, and he used to call the area recession-proof, and I used to say it's really hard to make that blanket statement. I wouldn't say it's recession-proof, but it's pretty close when it comes to housing, which is why our housing prices are just so much more exorbitant than any other area, comparatively speaking. Let's move on now to property taxes. So in DC, believe it or not, the property taxes are the lowest that you're going to see in the region. And why is that? Well, DC is not a state, in case you may have heard that there's been people that are pushing to make DC a state. But while it's not a state and it's just the district, it's only one jurisdiction. So that's the only jurisdiction that you pay taxes to is DC. So basically it's 85 cents per mil. That translates into every $100,000 of assessed value, you will pay $850. So You can do the math on that. You're looking at $2,000-$3,000 if you're in a 1-bedroom. That's going to be your annual tax rate, which is pretty inexpensive comparatively speaking when we're going to go to the other jurisdictions. The other good thing about DC is that if this is your primary residence, congrats, you get a homestead exemption. It's actually going to wipe out almost the first $100,000 of assessed values taxes that are associated with it. You'll save about $800. So that's pretty good right now, the benefit that we get. In Montgomery County, Maryland, the taxes are going to be a little bit different, and that's because you're likely paying two jurisdictions in almost all cases, right? You're going to pay property tax to the county. The county administers the programs that use that property tax money, like schools and police and things like that. And then if you live in a certain jurisdiction that has its own, like the city of Rockville, or there's certain cities in the county or different municipal areas, there might be an overlay of taxes as well that you have to pay, nominal, but it still adds up, right? So the tax rates are going to be anywhere from $1.15 per $100,000 all the way up to $1.70. Yes, there is a homestead credit. It's not as lucrative as DC's is. It says it's a $692 credit, but what it really does do is it has you sort of locked in place that if it's your home, you are not going to have these exorbitant, it's going to limit essentially your increase that they can do on your taxes so that it's limited as a max of 10%. Now, over in Northern Virginia, Arlington's property taxes are $1.03 per $100 of assessed value. So $1 million home is actually going to be $10,300. City of Alexandria is a little bit higher. It's $1.11 per $100 of assessed value. So the $1 million home now is going to be $11,100. So Fairfax County is at $1.14, but different areas in the county can differ greatly. So it's mostly in line with Alexandria. All right, so let's do a quick recap of what the property taxes would be on a house assessed at $1 million. And typically in the area, your market value is going to be ahead of the assessed value. That's basically what you want. You don't want to pay taxes on an assessed value of home that you couldn't get in the open market, right? So a $1 million house in DC with the homestead exemption is going to have taxes of $7,700 annually. In Montgomery County, that house, depending on where in the county it is going to have annual taxes anywhere between $11,000 and $17,000 assessed at $1 million. Now, if we go over to Northern Virginia, in Arlington, that $1 million house will have annual taxes of $10,300. In the city of Alexandria, you're looking at taxes of $11,100. And then Fairfax County, depending on where you are, it's going to be dependent on the cities and all of that, but you're basically in line with the city of Alexandria because Fairfax is at $1.14 per $100 of assessed value. Now, how do you save money here? Well, you can't because, you can't fight City Hall. But there's one new exciting thing that we need to talk about. Virginia has this personal property tax on cars, boats, RVs, and planes. And this has for many, many years kind of been the conundrum for people because they have to weigh out what their income is and decide if, like income taxes are going to make sense on the Maryland side or on the Virginia side. If you have a lot of vehicles, it could, you could pay a lot in offsetting just depending on how expensive those vehicles are and what you have. So it's just something that you have to keep in mind. Now, the exciting thing is that Virginia, the governor has decided, he's a Republican governor, and he's decided to introduce legislation to abolish the taxes on personal property vehicles, RVs, and all that. This is really like a game changer if this happens, because this has long been the equalizer between Virginia and Maryland, like I said. And so it hasn't passed yet. It's likely got a long way to go, but it's something to look out for and to keep in mind. All right, let's talk now about income taxes and where these kind of line up. So Virginia's income taxes are almost a flat tax. If you make more than $17,000 a year, you pay a flat tax. It's 5.75%. Doesn't matter what you make. And so again, like we were talking about, you just have to kind of keep in mind that, that personal property tax may not no longer be a thing. That kind of offsets all of this. So just keep that in mind. There are no additional taxes like we are going to see in Maryland, and that's because the Commonwealth of Virginia prohibits local taxes. The districts have very little taxing authorities, the counties do. Now, Maryland has a bracket system of taxes, but you don't hit the 5.75 until you get to $250,000 in income. Before you declare that Maryland is the winner here because you're paying less taxes up to the 250, whereas Virginia's getting you for the 5.75 earlier on, it is important to know that all cities and towns in Maryland can legislate actual taxes on you. And so those do vary anywhere between 2.25% to 3.2%, depending where you live. That is a pretty big deal. And that's what ends up taking Maryland's taxes to be pretty high for income taxes. So what's happening over in DC? Well, you've got a bracket system here as well. It starts at 6% once you have $10,000 in income, and it rises pretty steadily and pretty rapidly. By the time your household income is $250,000, you are paying $20,000 plus 9.25% of the excess over $250,000. So that is a whopping big difference in the district compared to Virginia and Maryland. So something you should know. Let's move on to food. When it comes to grocery stores here, repeat after me. Pay attention or you'll pay more. That's the mantra. You really have to watch what you're doing at the grocery stores. If you like to go to one store and do everything all at once, just know that you're gonna end up paying more overall, and some items are gonna blow your mind for why they're so expensive, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's really unbelievable how this works. I'm gonna give you specific examples, all right? You've probably seen the Boursin cheese. Little Boursin cheese, very cute, great for like little entertaining, it's like soft cheese, you can cut it off, put it on crackers, easy to spread, yum. Okay, so Boursin cheese costs one little rind of it, $8 at Safeway. If you go next door to Trader Joe's, you can get it for $4 and change, kind of amazing. Even better, if you go to Costco, you can get 3 of them packed together for $10. So if you went and got the 3 at Safeway and it was $24, stuff like that will ratchet up your grocery bill. Whole Foods is, it's legit whole paycheck. I found where they had seeded a pomegranate and put it into this little like quarter pint container, and they were charging $20 for it. You could get a pomegranate for $2, like $3 now, whatever. I would rather seed my own pomegranate and save $17 than have to buy it for Whole Foods. So you really have to kind of watch what you're doing. And if you see something exorbitant like that, like the seeded pomegranates, you just have to understand that that's sometimes a one-off or sometimes just a wild grocery store. The same applies in this area with restaurants. I have watched prices steadily increase here, and it's almost impossible to get out of a full service restaurant for less than $30 no matter what meal it is. And that's if you drink water. So tack on another 10 to 20% in service charges that a lot of restaurants here are now charging. This has become a very, very hot ticket item. And they'll say things like, if you want to tip, that's great, but they don't have signs that say like, we're paying our servers a living wage, which means that tip and extra money is just going, in most cases, to the person who runs the restaurant, is what people are saying. So you still have to tip on top of it. So think about getting a bill and then adding 50% onto it. And that is potentially, because tax is 10% in DC for restaurants. A bill of $30 for food only is going to cost you $45 by the time you're done and out of there. If you're just getting lunch, that's expensive. That's 2 people going to lunch for $100, and that has happened quite a bit to me. It's kind of crazy. Another example of this is going to be my stepson wanted to go to a hibachi restaurant, and he picked Benihana. And Benihana's a chain. I think we were all kind of surprised to get in there and find out the prices were insanity compared to any other like mom and pop hibachi restaurant in the area. Somebody got steak and shrimp, and it legit cost $55. Like I couldn't believe it. So you've got to kind of know where you're going, pay attention, or you will pay more. That is the mantra. All right, let's move on now to gas for your vehicle. So gas here is kind of hilarious. Gas stations also run the gamut. There are notorious gas stations where you'll see that the price of regular unleaded is over $5. And you're like, who would ever pay that when most gas stations in the area are in the $3.75 to $4 range? So most people will just go to those instead. There are a few little gems in the area there where gas is way cheaper. I'm looking at you, Liberty gas station on Duke Street. Your gas is $2.93 for regular unleaded right now. So comparing that with almost $1 more at most other stations, and then another $1 at some of these like wild card stations, these are things you have to know. So you got to figure out where you're going to get your gas, what grocery stores you're going to shop at, and that will help you save money. All right, a little note about commuting. So we have toll lanes here. Most highways offer an option for you to go into a special toll lane where you can pay a toll and then hopefully not have to deal with as much traffic as everybody else on the regular road. Whether you do this or not just depends on how much time you want to spend in your car and how quickly you want to get to where you're going. I've seen tolls for as high as $20 to go 6 or 7 miles. Your mileage here like literally may vary. This is a personal choice. It's one I really haven't made quite often, but I have a funny story. We were going to Myrtle Beach 2 summers ago, and we were in 2 separate cars because we had kids, we had dogs. I had the kids with me, my husband had the dogs with him, and he calls and flies by us in the toll lane and says, "See you at the pool, suckers." And we were like, what's Moneybags doing over there in the toll lane? It's like $20 just to get down the street. Anyway, all said and done, the girls and I stopped at a bookstore. We stopped a couple different places and we all got there at the same time. I don't know. His excuse was he had to get out and walk 3 dogs separately and that was his excuse. But anyway, I don't know. So it just depends. Sometimes the toll lanes work out, but just know they're an option, but they are very expensive. So pay attention or pay more. That is my update here for DC and the cost of living. That housing's definitely expensive, but there are ways around it, and everything else is expensive, but there are a couple little sneaky ways around it. So if you have any questions, my contact info is coming next.